Friday, everybody, and welcome into the Graham Look and Matt Blaine podcast, episode 259. And this is episode 8 of our ACC Under Review series. We are talking Louisville Cardinals. And this was kind of an interesting episode because we did look a little more towards the future because so many things have changed with Louisville. I really enjoyed hanging out with Louisville's play-by-play guy, Paul Rogers. He has a great personality. He told us he's going to tell you like it is, and I really appreciated that from our guy Paul.
I did too, KG. You know, he was, when I think of Louisville, you got to say it right.
Louisville.
When I think of Louisville, he's the radio guy. I mean, that was it. He's flying. He's wide open. Speed. Got to go. And like you said, was very, very blunt about some of his thoughts there. But I appreciate it. I appreciate when people. That. Yeah, when you form an opinion and you don't give me a political answer. So it was really fun talking with Paul, voice of the Cards, wrapping up. I will tell people a funny little story. When I hit him up and just wanted him to come on the podcast, he was like, we're talking about basketball. I said, no, man, we do not care about basketball. This is football only.
Well, we do care about basketball.
Kelly, half of this podcast.
But honestly, if you had said, I want to talk Louisville men's basketball, he may have not responded to you because
he might not.
I'm sure it's been a tough year for him talking about that and talking about an 8-win football team. He's like, let's do that.
Yeah, 8-win basketball team, 8-win football team. What do you want to talk about? Which team do you want to talk about? But, it was a lot of fun, KG. Of course, again, our Rock'em Sox guest, Paul Rogers, did a great job with us. Very appreciative of his time. And speaking of Rock'em Sox, guys, we're doing another great giveaway. And the Cards Sox are coming. These things are hot fire. Wait till you see them. It's not only do you have the Lamar Jackson with the hater shades blocking them out shots, but you also have these socks that are like engulfed in feathers. Looks like fire, but it's actually cardinal feathers. So really cool collection. You're not going to want to miss it. We've been doing giveaways for each and every ACC school. That's our partner, Rock'em Sox. Over 10,000 unique designs. You like Marvel characters, the superhero guys, as KG likes to say.
Those guys.
Like any pro team, NFL, NHL, MLB, NBA, all those. They've got them covered. And not to mention every collegiate team, especially right here in the ACC. They have got them covered. So, KG, go get your new favorite socks from old Rock'em.
That's right. And I like when you say unique designs. Some people might hear that and say, oh, okay, how unique are they? But truly, if you look at each, go on there and just check it out. It'll be interesting enough just to look because every different ACC school, they have unique stuff that applies to those schools. They had Primanti Brothers socks for Pittsburgh. Like you're not going to find that somewhere else. They have the Lamar Jackson socks, as we've said, for Louisville. So go check those out. It's really cool. And if you don't win the giveaway, which you can enter the giveaway on Mac's Twitter, you just got to retweet and follow. But if you don't win, that's okay. You can use our code GML20 at checkout at rockemsocks.com for 20% off your first order. That's GML20 for 20% off your first order at rockemsocks.com. Find your new lucky pair of socks for game day. You're going to, get ready for game day coming up, the new Jeff Brom era at rockemsocks.com.
Come on, KG. It's without further ado, let's get to our episode here, get to our interview, our Rock'em Sox guest, Paul Rogers. Paul, welcome into the show. The Cards finished with 8 wins, but I've got to say it was a little bit unconventional how we got here, man. I expected the 8 wins, but maybe not quite how we all expected. Just to start, could you give us your general thoughts on the entire season?
Funny you said that because when you first asked me to do this, I got to thinking about it, and I was thinking of how the season went, how it started especially, and how it ended up. And you're like, well, okay, but it was a rocky and winding road to get there. I'm not even sure. We all had a hard time really pegging what the expectations were this year. They were kind of all over the map. I think people were hoping they could make a bowl game, whether it's 6-6, 7-5, and then see what happens. Well, in the end, they won 8 games, including a bowl game. But they got off to just a horrible start, beginning with that very first game at Syracuse. Now, Syracuse turned out to be a lot better than everybody thought they were going to be, but Louisville just mysteriously just did not show up. I mean, a season-opening game, how can you come out and look like you're not interested? And that's what happened, and people were coming out of that game just they couldn't fathom it. And then they go to a very good Central Florida team who rarely loses at home and won there. And you think, okay, we're back on the right track. Stumble next week, and that's so it went. First half of the season, you'd win and then you'd lose. And then finally they kind of kicked it in, mainly on the defensive end with really improved play and had that 4-game winning streak highlighted by that crazy 35-point third quarter explosion with 6 turnovers against Wake Forest. And, went through a really good stretch there. The winning streak ended at Clemson, but they played okay. Bounced back with a good win over NC State. Then finished the season with another loss to Kentucky, which is really getting in the craw of the Louisville fans, not just losing to your arch rival, but all honesty.
Mine too, by the way. It's in my crawl too.
To be honest, they haven't been competitive the last 3 years against Kentucky, and that's what really has people distressed. But they bounced back out of that and won the most unusual bowl game ever. First off, you're playing football in a baseball stadium. Secondly, your coach is left to go to the coach to coach the team you're playing. So it was kind of, I guess, the perfect cherry on top of what was a crazy season to beat a soon-to-be coached by Scott Satterfield Cincinnati team in a game that was a lot of fun, actually. If you're not going to be in a BCS bowl, then go someplace different or unique or fun. And to go to Fenway Park and play a game was kind of neat.
I think that was summed up very well, Paul. It was probably one of the weirdest seasons of the college football year when you look at just ending up with 8 wins, but just odd all over the place. And I think a lot of that had to do with Malik Cunningham and his injuries and just not living up to what we thought. We had, I believe was it Greg McElroy, Mac, who came up with us in the offseason and had Malik Cunningham in the Heisman conversation. I mean, this guy, he had the talent. So, in addition to those injuries, what else do you think really happened with Malik?
I think, first and foremost, again, I think the injuries were the key element. Malik, who's not able to really run, is not Malik. I mean, he can throw the ball, maybe a little bit erratic, but he can throw it okay. But what makes him different is his running ability. He's a very dynamic runner, a very elusive runner, and one that's hard to pin down. So when you're battling these injuries, and they weren't necessarily his legs, it was kind of everything. I don't even know what all they had. I think he hurt his wrist at one time, his ankle at one time. And then probably the biggest issue non-injury-wise was Louisville did not have a go-to over-the-top receiver like a Tutu Atwell or a Tyler Harrell. Tyler Hudson was terrific and had a great year, but he did not have your breakaway speed, and he did not have that element. When Satterfield first came here, there was the talk about how his offense was so running-oriented, and it was. But what that run emphasis did was open up those big plays. I mean, his first 2 years here, they had an extraordinary number of big plays. And I don't mean 40-yard big plays. I mean 70, 80, 90-yard big plays. And you can get that with Tutu Atwell and Tyler Harrell and that kind of thing. So Malik didn't have that. And he just never really seemed to get settled in with the injury thing. He'd play a little bit, then he'd be out a little bit. So, unfortunately, I mean, he still ran for over 500 yards and 12 touchdowns, which by most quarterback standards is pretty high, but not what he had been doing. And then he threw for, 1,500 or so, I think.
Right.
So it never quite going this year. Got quite going this year for Malik.
Yeah, and Paul, I think that's exactly what you said. That's what I have written down here next is I think what had so much to do with that with Malik was the lack of consistency, the lack of longevity. He's having to, build relationships with new guys, young guys, figure it out quickly, and they just couldn't really get on the same page. That explosive piece, though, that you talk about was so much of what Louisville did and being able to go over the top. Okay, you're going to run 2 high safeties. We're going to run it all day long. Now you switch, you bring one down. Here we go over the top. So that just almost handicapped what Louisville wanted to do offensively. How do you see that changing, I guess, this coming season?
Well, Jeff Brom, which, by the way, is the most popular hire we've had for years and years.
We'll dive into him some, too. We'll dive into him
some. Ecstatic. But we all know he loves to throw the football. In fact, his introductory press conference, he got a laugh and he said, I know you got to run the ball occasionally, almost begrudgingly admitting, but he'll run it. But he's got a very creative mindset, offensive design. He'll bring in, I'm sure, more receivers. He's already brought in a quarterback who played for him that went out to Cal and now is coming to Louisville. So I just think you're going to see a much more wide open, imaginative offense. He's a fan of trick plays. He's always trying to dial up something. So that's among the reasons people are really excited about him. And obvious being, you don't just hire Jeff Brom, you hire the whole family. I mean, the Brom family is a Louisville institution. It's great having them back, and not just because of the people they are. That's a huge part of it, but because of the football people they are and the football coach he is. He talked about, I don't really have hobbies. And they said, I do like football. That's kind of Jeff Brom.
Yeah, that's what you want in your college football coach. You really don't want him to have any hobbies because he can't, because he's got to recruit 24/7.
Sure.
and just be, in it as much as possible. You mentioned the run game, and we had Scott Satterfield on before the year. He was very, very excited about the running back room. He was talking 5 deep. He was super pumped. Injuries, again, plagued this group. You did have some guys emerge towards the end, especially in that bowl game. So what was your overall evaluation of the running back room?
I learned once again that you can never have too many running backs. I mean, we all thought they were loaded at running back. I mean, they truly were about 5 deep. They wound up with 2 there at the end of the year. Maybe the best one was actually Tyon Evans, the transfer from Tennessee, but he had injury issues all the time. The few games he was healthy, he looked like a guy who could really be pretty special. But when he couldn't go, you wound up with Travion Cooley and Jawar Jordan, both really playing well, putting up some good games. But neither one of those was a 30 carry a back game. They didn't have somebody you could rely on just pound. They needed bodies, and they frankly were pretty much out of bodies. So they didn't run it. They ran it okay, and especially as you said, the Cincinnati game. But overall, they with the lack of a breakaway passing attack, you couldn't just rely on pounding it on the ground all the time. So they had a tough time with it.
Yeah, and I think it's so fascinating because this episode in particular, we're looking back at 22, but also we're so forward thinking because there's so much that is changing and different. And another kind of big room with that is going to be this offensive line. And these guys have been the pillar of consistency for a handful of years. You're losing some guys, and again, injuries moving around this year, and it just seems like that's the name of the game for Louisville at a bunch of different positions. What do you anticipate that room looking like in 23?
The offensive line room?
Yes, sir.
I honestly don't know, to be honest with you. The way things change with the transfer portal and guys coming in and guys going out, but they're obviously losing some long-time, really reliable guys. I think Brian Hudson played essentially every single snap of the season. I think they've said he played every snap. I have to believe there might have been one of those blowouts, not that we had that many, but one of those games where he finally got a little bit of rest. But to my recollection, he was always out there. Caleb Chandler, guys like that who have been around and been so stable. So, we'll see what they wind up with. I'm sure, Jeff's going to want guys who can protect. But again, I go back to Jeff, of course, played here under Howard Snellenberger, and one of Coach Snellenberger's ways of scheming when he was first coming here trying to build things. So he said, when you got a great passing attack, you don't have to win the line of scrimmage like you do in a running game. You just got to hold your own with the line of scrimmage, and that's what he was trying for. And I think that maybe that'll be the philosophy Jeff takes on at first, at least until he finds out exactly what he's got up front there.
Sure, and I know just with scheme change, with thought process change, that there's different body types that fit what you want to do. And I'm interested, Paul, your thoughts on this, and the quarterback situation in particular. Obviously, a massive recruit coming in that is going to want to play, a transfer portal guy who's been with Brom there, and you have a couple of guys that have been at Louisville for a year or maybe a little bit more. How do you anticipate, or just how do you think that plays out? I know it's a competition. I know best man's going to win, all this and that, but just things that maybe you've heard or seen. If you could project for us, what does that look
Pierce
like?
Pierce Clarkson is a top flight quarterback, recruited and wanted by many. I don't know if he's right at that super elite status to be a freshman to come in and make a huge impact right off the bat. He may need a year to sit behind someone. You'd like to play him some. I remember Jeff's freshman year. I think Howard brought him in for the beginning of the second quarter every game. So Pierce is a guy that's going to fight for the job. I don't really know if he can win it when you've got the veteran coming in from Cal that played with Jeff at Purdue. And then you've got, I guess, the third guy on that list now would be Brock Dolman, who wound up being the main guy behind Malik Cunningham.
Right.
Brock was a guy, he used to tickle me. He just had this mentality. He was kind of insulted if you called him a backup quarterback because he called himself QB1. And what he meant by that was, I'm a quarterback. And as far as I'm concerned, when you put me in the game, I'm going to play the game. I'm not of the mentality that, gosh, I hope I get a chance to get out there and play. When he gets a chance, he does. And he played really well in some tough circumstances several times. So, but I still think he would be third on that list like he's always going to be. And I'll insult him again when I say that, I guess. But I think that's where it shakes out with those three. And again, I think, Jeff may get one or two more. Our quarterbacks are like running backs. You can really never have too many.
Exactly, especially first year when you're trying to kind of figure out what you're all about. I love that story about Doman there. Yeah, I'm QB1. What are you talking about? Let's look at the defensive side of the ball. The defense was really the bright spot of this team and the most consistent. When you look at how they got after the passer, it was just special. And where would you say, and we've had Keitrell Clark on, he was great. We learned he was a cat guy. That was really fun.
That was shocking to be truthful.
His cat crashed the interview. Where would you say was the biggest piece of improvement for this defense this year?
It really was to a large degree everywhere, but it starts up front. They were able to get pressure on the quarterback. I'm not sure if they finished up number one in the country in sacks or not, but I know they were close.
They were up there.
Tackles for loss. Diaby and Abdullah were fantastic.
Yeah.
Then you had solid play on the back end. But I would say it started up front with the pressure they got on the quarterback and their ability to, for the most part, contain run games. They didn't get gouged that much through the run game, and they came up with 15 interceptions, I think, had a total of interceptions. And so that's really the first time that the defense really got people excited. It's funny, Louisville is known for when they had when Howard Snellberg was here, when Bobby Petrino was here, and some others, people like that high-scoring offense. But I'm telling you, nothing gets this crowd really rolling like a big defensive play and a big defensive stand. Right. And one like the Wake Forest game when he had turnover, and the police is just delirious. I mean, that really gets them going. This is the first year in quite a while we've seen that.
Yeah, they did end up leading the country in sacks. I mean, the turnaround from that, just production-wise, was crazy. I mean, to see that. And it was a bunch of older guys that came together, and, they get the record that they did to start the season. They're like, this is enough. And we talked to Keitrell about that, and he said we had a players-only meeting, and we were real with guys and seeing this is what you're not doing. This is what you have to do. And the defense was such a big part of that turnaround. And as you've mentioned a couple of times, I've been waiting to talk about this. That Wake Forest game, I got to call that game. And it was the craziest game I've ever called. You certainly have called more games than I have. Have you ever seen anything close to that?
No. I mean, 6 turnovers in one quarter. Zach Hartman generally is a quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over.
At all.
Interceptions. He was fumbling. I mean, it was all going. And I remember just kind of thinking, another one. It just kept escalating, and it was really dumbfounding to watch that happen. And while that's certainly an extreme, Louisville kind of built themselves on the turnover game, which has been really against them in recent years. This year they had big turnover margins throughout, especially in that game, and they really thrived in that. That was, as you said, that was probably the wackiest quarter of football I've ever seen.
And nuts. What is there one that was more memorable? One turnover or sack, fumble, anything where you're just
there's so many.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy. There is.
It's all kind of a blur, really. I do remember a couple of times. I think he had. I know one, maybe two that were debatable whether his arm was going forward or not. Mm-hmm. And at first I was kind of, well, no, that's he was throwing it. And then I saw the replay and I don't know. And sure enough, they did roll a fumble. And I remember those just. Kind of everything went Louisville's way during that stretch.
Yeah, I vaguely remember at halftime there was like I think it was a sack fumble that they then reversed and said he was down, but it was a fumble. And I remember the interview at halftime, and Scott was pissed, and he just said, "We're going to take care of this." And then the third, fourth quarter, they erupt, and it was just like, okay, ball don't lie. And man, KG, it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
Interesting, you said Scott was pissed because. I loved him. He was a great guy to work with, and I think a very solid football coach. But the fans never totally bought in to Coach Satterfield, and it's hard for me to pinpoint why. But what you would often hear was people didn't feel he showed the passion. He didn't get upset enough, and believe me, he did. But people have different ways of showing it. But he was not a guy that would fly off the handle. But on the occasions when he did, that's what I want to see. Oh, my coach. They're fighting for
That's right. That's my coach. That's my coach.
Yeah.
Right there.
That's really interesting because I've heard multiple people say that the Louisville fan base never truly bought into Satterfield, and maybe they thought he wasn't ever truly bought in when you obviously the South Carolina stuff that happened a couple off
people never got over that.
No, you never want to feel like you are the second choice. You never want to feel like that, and so that's probably part of it. But you're right. I think maybe he's just not that kind of guy gonna go rip a referee's head off. But I don't know, maybe it would have helped.
And it's funny in a weird sense. It's unfortunate he had such a good first year. When he came here,
expectation was just so high.
Yeah, his first year here, it was just in shambles, and people were hoping for anything. Well, they went 8-5, so people thought, "Oh man, here we go." Well, the next year was COVID, which threw everybody for a loop. I know some teams wound up having good years, but even teams that had good years talked about how hard it was. So that was a big step back. Then the next year, they were in so many games and just couldn't close them out. And there were two
fourth quarter too. I mean, like winning games or right there and just couldn't close.
They had 3 games where they won or lost on a made or missed field goal at the end of the game, and then had that Clemson game where they had a 1st and goal to 2 and couldn't punch it in.
So up by like 14, by the way, going into the fourth.
Right.
It's crazy.
So one school of thought is, man, we're right there. Where it doesn't take much, we can get there. But then other people were thinking, I've been seeing this too much. We can't close out the games. We're not doing the right things. He doesn't call the right play.
Wow.
He runs it too much. All those kinds of things. And then this year, it was kind of going, no. But then he finished up. People who didn't like him when they ended up that good, they said, well, God, I can't fire him now. And you always get that part of the fan base. Well, they didn't have to. So we had the most bizarre ending of all when he opted out for Cincinnati.
Okay, let's talk about that ending. Again, this is the weirdest college football season ever when you look at Louisville. So what was your reaction? Because, again, you said you knew, obviously you knew Scott well, you liked him. He announces he's going to Cincinnati. You realize they're going to play each other in the bowl game. What was the vibe around the program and around some of the players during all that?
Personally, I was stunned. I had no idea it was coming. And I'm trying to remember the timing of it. I believe they announced the bowl game.
It was the next day, Paul.
Yes,
it was the next day.
In fact, I do every Monday morning, I go into the station that carries our games and just do an hour with the guys kind of, this week. And
you had a lot to talk about.
To go there to talk about, going to a bowl game, things worked out well. And they're talking about Satterfield. I was like, what are they talking about? And it just happened. He had just taken the Cincinnati job. So that was very bizarre. And I don't know, to be honest with you, exactly what – I think he wanted an extension, and I think they were reluctant to give it to him. But I don't know exactly what the attraction was, why he liked Cincinnati, and frankly, what Cincinnati liked about him. As I said, I like him a lot, but if you look at the one-loss record, it doesn't jump out at you like, boy, there's a guy we got to have. So I don't really know what brought those two together, but they seem to be happy with it. So
I agree. I agree with that, especially a team that just made the playoff. That's your expectation, and we'll see. We'll see how it works out. We'll see how it works out. Fascinating to say the least. There. Listen, when you and I were texting back and forth, wanted to get you to jump on here. You were telling me the most excitement that has been around Louisville football right now with this hire and how massive it is bringing Coach Braum home. What does that do, man? What does it do for the community, for the team, for just all of it, bringing him home?
For the first time in a long time, the fan base is really united and excited. With Satterfield, they didn't really know what they had. Of course, you've been through the bad Petrino finish. When they expanded the stadium, the new end zone section, the Adidas section, the pointed, I call it like what Seattle's stadium looks like.
Yeah.
Since they have expanded that and made the capacity, whatever it is, I think it's barely under 60 or right around 60, they've never sold it out. Came really close Scott's first game. We played Notre Dame and came really close. But other than that, they've never really filled it. I think they will fill it this year.
Wow.
People are that excited about it. A lot of people wanted Jeff to come here when Satterfield was hired. I totally understood Jeff not coming here. I think it really tugged at his heart, but he had just gotten to Purdue. He didn't. That's the way the Brahms are. He wasn't going to. They gave him this opportunity, and he wasn't going to say thanks, see you later. He was going to see it through. And I said at the time, I said, 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, if this job comes open again, I think Jeff would then take a serious look at it again. And I had no idea that would happen, but it did. And when it did, it didn't take long. I mean, it was less than a week when he was in here as the new coach. So he seems excited to be here. His family wanted to come back here. His parents still lived here, but they were burning up I-65 every week between Louisville and Lafayette. Somebody said the tailgating is now going to be like the Catholic picnic every week. That's just what it is. It's like everybody's friends with the Brahms. So
That's right.
It's going to be spectacular from the personality standpoint, and hopefully when we all have good reason to think from a football standpoint too.
Yeah, well, let's get in there and we'll get you out of here. Last question for you, man. Just what are reasonable expectations for year one of this new era?
I think people are.
Is it the team a mystery again, or do we kind of know?
I think by the time
right
now they're still putting pieces together, but I think by the time we get to the start of the season, things will be pretty well in place. And I'm assuming people are going to have fairly high expectations. Think we want 8, and if things fall right, we want 9 or 10. I mean,
Sure.
I don't know you can realistically say we're going to win the conference championship, but right now, as we all known for quite a while, Clemson is still Clemson, but maybe not quite the untouchable Clemson they've been. And the number 2 spot behind is pretty much wide open. And UNC's pretty solid now. State's been good lately. Pittsburgh's been okay. I think Louisville feels like there's room there for them to move up right to that spot just below Clemson.
Yeah, especially with no divisions. It's
Right.
true number 2, and I think a lot of people are excited about that. Well, Paul, this was a lot of fun. We appreciate your insight, man. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. See you later.
Man, big shout out to our guy Paul there. It was so much fun just talking about the different things. And as you said, KG, on the front end, a little bit forward facing in this interview because just so much change, so much has happened. Guys leaving, guys transferring, new coach coming in. And I don't think we can set that scene enough just to really remind people of what happened. Selection Sunday occurs. Louisville selected to play in a bowl game, the Fenway Bowl against Cincinnati. Awesome. Really fun matchup. The very next day, less than 12 hours later, Scott Satterfield, breaking news, goes to Cincinnati. And you're just like,
Bye.
what? These guys are playing each other and he's coaching the other team? What is going on? It's absolutely bonkers. We've talked about this so much. I just couldn't imagine being in that locker room, playing that guy, playing his team. And you saw what Louisville did. I mean, they went to town, and it was kind of a physically dominating type of game. But, again, appreciate Paul. Thank you so much for your time and just be able to sit down with him and talk about the Cards was a lot of fun, KG.
Well, and I really liked reliving one of the weirdest seasons we've ever seen. And I mean that with love. Like, you still won 8 games in one of the weirdest seasons ever where Malik Cunningham basically was never healthy. So that is impressive. And the defense, what the defense was able to do and step up and lead the country in sacks. Keitrell Clark told it to us back when we had him on, that the defense felt like they had to do something. And they really did. But when you think about going to Syracuse and laying an egg, then you beat UCF. Then you almost beat a really good Florida State team. And then you proceed to, kind of win-loss. Then you have the Wake Forest game, which is one of the weirdest games of all time. And, of course, Mac had the pleasure of calling it. You beat JMU, and then we all think you're going to be fine against Kentucky, get squashed. Like, it was such a weird season. And I'm wearing a Kentucky blue shirt right now, and I feel bad about it.
It's kind of Carolina. I'd say that's more Carolina blue. It's Carolina.
Yeah, it's like a royal blue. But the Kentucky situation, as much as this fan base is excited about Jeff Brom, and they should be, and I'm excited about it, I think that is still a prevailing narrative of how do you perform against Kentucky? Because as Paul mentioned, not only have you lost multiple games in a row, but the games haven't really been close. And I know that Kentucky rivalry means so much to Jeff Brom. So I'm sure there will be even more of an emphasis placed on that rivalry too.
Yeah, even in a year where I'm guaranteeing these guys are going to win. Like, when you look at the strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, you look at the strengths and weaknesses of the team. Kentucky's offensive line played so subpar. They had injuries, they had changes, whatever. Couldn't do anything. Couldn't protect Will Levis, all these different things. I thought Louisville was going to go nuts and absolutely have a sack fest, tackle for loss fest. And it was the opposite. Kentucky did all those things. And they hadn't done it relatively all year.
It just never makes sense.
It was so weird. So to me, I asked him about expectation. I was kind of hoping he would get to the Kentucky game. He touched on it a little bit. That's the thing. Like, I'm going to grade next season on that game. Not just being in it, but winning it. And I think that you can really – just get off to a great start if you get that done. I cannot stress how important that game to future success of Louisville is going to be.
Yeah, definitely.
And guess what? Devin Leary is going to be their quarterback, so it's going to be tough. That's
right. The whole Devin Leary factor, that's going to be really fun. And I think what you were talking about, too, with Paul about the quarterback room, that is going to be an interesting conversation.
It is.
Throughout spring, too, but the summer leading into it. that's going to be really fascinating to see how Jeff Brom handles that.
Yeah, and because I think what as you just mentioned, what makes it even more interesting is that everybody is starting from relative ground zero.
Right.
Like I know you have, got some guys who are older who maybe have more experience in college. You have the young man coming from Cal who's been in Brom's system, but you also have that young Thundercat that's ready to go and doesn't have any type of mental whatever at the college game. I'm fascinated to see who runs out there first. And, I am kind of a believer in like taking some time with your guy, but I'm also a believer in like, let's get going. Like the future's now. Let's get him ready. And if that takes some growing pains, so be it. But it's going to be a fascinating situation just to look at that piece in particular of what Louisville can do moving forward.
And I like what Paul said in that I want to see a sellout. Let's see if Louisville fans can show up and support this team with Jeff Brom, their guy, a Louisville, like a Louisville son,
Right.
The prodigal son return. I do think you will see more support pack in the stands. And I'm excited to see that for Louisville.
Well, I think you have to. I mean, I was there again to bring this up, that Wake Forest game, a top 10 team coming to town, and there was maybe 25,000 people. I mean, it was embarrassing.
Mac was really disappointed in that. But I think a lot of that was the people. It just felt like the fan base never really bought into Satterfield.
Yeah.
That was prevalent the whole time.
Let's do it, Louisville. Let's go. So anyway, we're excited. We're excited to see it. Excited to have Coach Brom here. Can't wait to speak with him in person and have him here on the show because we'll definitely do that moving forward. But that's it, guys. Thank you for listening to another great episode of Gramlich and Mac Lane. Go over to YouTube. If you're not here staring at me right now, go over to YouTube, mash this subscribe button. Really appreciate you guys following us on that and seeing the numbers and everything grow there. It's been a lot of fun. But also go over to Apple Podcast, rate, review, subscribe. Always great to hear from you guys. But until next time, we'll see y'all.